Inflammation is the reason your knees ache in the morning, the reason a headache won't quit, the reason an old injury still complains when the weather turns. Most people reach for a bottle of ibuprofen without a second thought. But long before pharmacies existed, healers were already treating swelling, pain, and fever with what grew in the garden. And modern research keeps circling back to the same plants, finding the exact compounds that explain why they worked. Today we're covering 10 of them. Plants studied for anti-inflammatory power that, in some research, holds up remarkably well against ibuprofen itself. What they are, why they work, how people have used them for generations, and how to grow every one of them yourself. This isn't about throwing away what works. It's about understanding that nature was running these experiments long before any laboratory existed, and that the garden outside your window may hold more relief than you realized. Let's start with the plant most researchers consider the gold standard. Turmeric curcuma longa, a tall, leafy plant with a thick underground rhizome, the part actually used. Inside that rhizome is curcumin, a compound studied for its ability to block the same inflammatory pathways that ibuprofen targets. Several trials on knee osteoarthritis found curcumin extract performing comparably to ibuprofen for pain relief, with fewer stomach complaints. Traditionally, the rhizome is dried, ground, and simmered into a paste or golden milk, often paired with black pepper, which dramatically boosts absorption. In the garden, turmeric wants warmth, partial shade, and rich, well-draining soil. Plant the rhizome pieces about 5 centimeters deep and 30 centimeters apart in spring, once the soil holds steady above 20 degrees Celsius. Harvest arrives 7 to 10 months later, when the leaves yellow and die back. In India, turmeric has been part of both cooking and healing for thousands of years, used long before anyone could name the compound responsible. A typical study dose runs between 500 milligrams and 1,000 milligrams of curcumin extract daily, and it's worth noting that very high doses can thin the blood, so anyone already on blood thinners should be cautious. Next, a plant already sitting in most kitchens: ginger. Zingiber officinale. Its rhizome contains gingerols, compounds that research has shown suppress the same inflammatory enzymes as many anti-inflammatory drugs. Studies on muscle soreness and menstrual pain have found ginger extract reducing discomfort at a level close to standard pain relievers. Fresh ginger, sliced thin and steeped in hot water for 10 minutes, makes the simplest preparation. A cup taken at the first sign of soreness. To grow it, plant a sprouted rhizome piece just under the soil surface in a wide, shallow container or a shaded garden bed. Keep the soil consistently moist, never soggy. Harvest begins around 8 months in, digging carefully at the edges of the clump. Sailors once carried ginger on long voyages, specifically to settle the stomach and ease joint stiffness during months at sea, a use that modern research on nausea and inflammation has largely confirmed. Now for one with a direct historical link to the pill in your medicine cabinet: willow bark. Salix alba. The inner bark contains salicin, the compound that chemists eventually modified into aspirin. For centuries, healers stripped the bark, dried it, and brewed it into a bitter tea for fever and joint pain. Modern research on low back pain has found willow bark extract reducing pain scores in a manner similar to standard doses of conventional pain relief. If you're growing willow, choose a moist, sunny spot near water if you have it. Willows are thirsty trees. Plant a young sapling in early spring, spacing it well away from underground pipes, since the roots spread aggressively. Bark is harvested from 2 to 3-year-old branches in early spring, when the sap is rising. Ancient Egyptian and Greek physicians both recorded willow bark as a remedy for pain and fever, centuries before a chemist finally isolated the compound that started it all. Because it behaves similarly to conventional pain relievers, it carries the same caution around stomach sensitivity and shouldn't be combined with other blood-thinning medication. This next plant grows as tree resin, not a leaf or root. Boswellia. Boswellia serrata, also called Indian frankincense. The resin tapped from its bark contains boswellic acids, compounds studied specifically for their effect on the inflammatory pathway involved in joint cartilage breakdown. Clinical research on osteoarthritis has repeatedly shown Boswellia extract easing joint pain and stiffness over several weeks of use. Traditionally, the raw resin is chewed or dissolved into a tincture, It thrives in hot, arid climates with rocky, well-draining soil, a difficult plant for cold climate gardens, though it can be grown in a large container brought indoors before frost. Boswellia resin has been burned as incense and used in healing rituals across the Middle East and North Africa for thousands of years, long recognized as more than just a fragrance. If you want to keep learning which plants can support your health, subscribe. There's a new one every week. Fifth on the list is a root with a name straight out of its appearance: Devil's Claw, Harpagophytum procumbens. The tuberous root contains harpagicides, compounds studied for reducing inflammatory markers tied to arthritis and lower back pain. Trials comparing Devil's Claw extract to standard anti-inflammatory medication for hip and knee pain found the plant holding its own over several weeks of daily use. The dried, sliced root is traditionally simmered into a decoction. It grows natively in dry, sandy soil across southern Africa, needing full sun and almost no standing water. In cooler climates, it does best in a raised bed with sandy, fast-draining soil and protection from frost. Sand healers in the Kalahari used the root long before European traders carried it home in the 1900s, where it eventually earned a place in modern herbal medicine cabinets. Pregnant individuals are generally advised to avoid it, since traditional use also includes easing labor. Sixth, a plant already famous for its antioxidants: green tea, Camellia sinensis. The young leaves are rich in EGCG, a catechin studied for calming inflammatory signaling throughout the body, particularly in joint and gut tissue. Research on rheumatoid arthritis has linked regular green tea consumption to lower markers of inflammation. Preparation is simple. Steep the young leaves in water just under boiling for 2 to 3 minutes. Water too hot turns the flavor bitter and degrades the compound. As a garden plant, Camellia sinensis prefers acidic, well-draining soil and partial shade, and tolerates being pruned into a small, tidy shrub. Leaves are hand-picked once the plant reaches about 1 meter in height. Buddhist monks in China are credited with popularizing the daily habit of drinking green tea, valuing it as much for clarity of mind as for the body's ease. 2 to 3 cups a day is the range most studies rely on, well within what most people already drink without thinking twice. Seventh, a plant that brings heat along with its benefits: Cayenne Pepper, Capsicum annuum. The fruit contains capsaicin, the compound responsible for its burn and also the one studied for depleting a pain-signaling chemical in nerve endings when applied topically. Research on arthritis and nerve pain has found topical capsaicin cream reducing discomfort meaningfully over repeated use. Traditionally, the dried, crushed pepper is blended into an oil or salve for external application, never taken directly on broken skin. Growing cayenne is straightforward: full sun, warm soil, and steady watering. Start seeds indoors, transplant once nights stay above 15 degrees Celsius, and expect ripe red peppers within 90 days. Indigenous cultures across the Americas used cayenne both as food and medicine for thousands of years before it ever reached a European kitchen. Always dilute capsaicin oil before applying it to skin and keep it well away from the eyes. Eighth, a rainforest vine with a name matching its thorns: cat's claw, Uncaria tomentosa. The inner bark contains oxandole alkaloids, compounds studied for modulating immune response and lowering inflammatory markers in joint tissue. Small trials on rheumatoid arthritis have shown reduced joint swelling with consistent use of bark extract. It's traditionally prepared as a simmered decoction from the shredded inner bark. This is a tropical climbing vine, needing warmth, humidity, and something sturdy to climb. Outside the tropics, it can be grown in a large pot with a trellis, brought indoors well before any chill arrives. Indigenous healers throughout the Peruvian Amazon have relied on this vine for generations, long before it made its way into modern joint support supplements sold worldwide. This is only the first seed of what this garden holds. Subscribe and grow with us. Ninth, a spice most people already keep in the cabinet: clove, Syzygium aromaticum. The dried flower buds contain eugenol, a compound with a long dental history, used for its numbing and anti-inflammatory effect on sore gums and toothaches. Research has found eugenol suppressing the same inflammatory enzyme pathway targeted by common pain relievers. A single clove or a drop of clove oil on a cotton swab applied directly to a sore tooth remains one of the oldest home remedies still in use. The clove tree itself needs a genuinely tropical climate, warm, humid, and sheltered from wind, taking years before it flowers. A patient project for gardeners in the right zone, or a container specimen kept indoors elsewhere. Clove found its way along the ancient spice routes from the islands of Indonesia, and dentists were recommending it centuries before modern dental anesthesia existed. And finally, the 10th. Rosemary. Rosmarinus officinalis. This fragrant, needle-leafed shrub contains rosmarinic acid and carnosic acid, both studied for reducing inflammatory markers linked to joint and muscle pain. Research on osteoarthritis has found rosemary extract, applied as a topical gel, easing stiffness with regular use. The fresh or dried leaves make a fragrant tea, or the oil can be infused and rubbed directly onto sore joints. Rosemary is famously forgiving in the garden. Full sun, poor to average soil, and minimal water once established. Plant a young start in spring, space it 60 centimeters from its neighbors, and it will reward you with fragrant growth for years, even decades, in the right climate. Ancient Greek scholars wore rosemary sprigs while studying, believing it sharpened memory, and Mediterranean households have kept it growing by the doorstep ever since. Half kitchen herb, half household remedy. 10 plants. One thread connecting them all. Compounds shaped by nature that modern labs are only now explaining. Turmeric and ginger for everyday inflammation. Willow Bark and Boswellia for joints. Devil's Claw and green tea for chronic discomfort. Cayenne and cat's claw for nerve and immune response. Clove for sudden pain. Rosemary for the long haul. None of this replaces a conversation with a doctor about serious or persistent pain, and none of it means throwing away what's already working for you. What it does mean is that inflammation has been fought with roots, bark, resin, and leaf for far longer than it's been fought with a pill bottle. And that long history is exactly why researchers keep going back to test these plants in the first place. If even one of these earns a spot in your soil this season, you're not just growing a plant. You're growing something people have trusted for centuries, tended through hard winters and passed down through generations. And science is only now catching up to why it always worked.